Her breath came in shallow waves, eyes wide with disbelief and something deeper. Something fragile yet fierce stirring beneath the surface. The test read pregnant. Not just once, but 3 tiny pink lines confirmed what the doctor's call had hinted at earlier that day. Triplets. She hadn't told Marcos yet. He was still at work, again. His schedule had become a fortress, walls built of meetings, deadlines, and unspoken distance. Lately, their conversations had shrunk to logistics. Who would buy groceries when the electricity bill was due? Whether he'd be home for dinner, he rarely was. The warmth that once filled their shared silences had evaporated, replaced by a polite, careful emptiness. Clara stood slowly, her reflection catching in the mirror across the room. She looked the same dark eyes, same soft smile, but she felt like a stranger in her own skin. A new life pulsed inside her. No, not 1, 3. 3 heartbeats where there had been none. The weight of it pressed against her ribs, not with fear, but with awe and a quiet dread she couldn't name. She walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared out at the city lights blinking through the rain. Her mind raced ahead. Nursery plans, maternity leave, sleepless nights, joy, chaos, love beyond measure. But then another thought slithered in, Marcos's face when she told him. Would his eyes light up? Or would they narrow, calculating the cost, the inconvenience, the disruption to the sleek, controlled future he'd been building? That night, when he finally came home past midnight, smelling of espresso and exhaustion, she met him at the door. Hey, he murmured, loosening his tie without looking at her. Long day. Clara took a breath. Her voice was softer than she intended. I have news. He paused, finally meeting her gaze. For a heartbeat, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with. The one who used to hold her hand during thunderstorms, who remembered how she took her tea. But then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and his eyes flickered away. Is it good news? He asked, already reaching for the device. She swallowed the lump in her throat. I'm pregnant. His hand froze. He looked up slowly, brows knitting together. Pregnant? Yes. She stepped closer, her voice trembling now. And it's triplets, Marcos. 3 babies. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. This was thick, heavy, a vacuum where joy should have rushed in. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then he let out a short, humorless laugh. Triplets? Are you serious? The way he said it, not with wonder, but with something like alarm, made her stomach drop. I just found out today, she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as if to shield the tiny lives within from his tone. I thought you'd be happy. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit. Happy? Clara, do you have any idea what this means? 3 kids at once? My promotion is next month. We were supposed to move to the new condo, not turn this place into a daycare. His words landed like stones. She flinched. It's not just your life, Marcos. It's ours. And theirs. He stopped pacing, turned to her, and for the first time, she saw not anger but panic, raw, unfiltered panic, in his eyes. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. This changes everything. I know, she said, her voice breaking. But maybe it changes things for the better. Maybe it reminds us what really matters. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past her, heading for the bedroom. We'll talk tomorrow. I need to think. But tomorrow never came. 2 days later, his side of the closet was empty. A note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. And just like that, Clara was alone. Alone but not empty. Because inside her, 3 hearts beat steadily, defiantly, as if to say, we're here. And we're enough. She stood in that silent apartment, tears streaming down her face. Not just from grief, but from a dawning, terrifying strength. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered, so softly only the unborn could hear. We'll be okay. I promise. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single star pierced through the clouds. And in that moment, Clara's journey truly began. Not as a wife abandoned, but as a mother rising. Certo. Agora atue como narrador e storyteller, desenvolva a história sem marcações com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico 2 com diálogo como se eu fosse o espectador, sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoção. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura da narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo em inglês. Com 6.000 caracteres, The Weeks After Clara's announcement should have been filled with soft laughter, shared dreams, and the quiet thrill of preparing for new life. Instead, the apartment grew colder, quieter, like a house holding its breath. Marcos didn't yell. He didn't slam doors. His abandonment was surgical, precise. He simply withdrew. He came home later each night, his eyes fixed on his laptop, even at the dinner table. When Clara tried to talk about prenatal vitamins or the name she'd been dreaming of, Lena, for her grandmother, he'd nod absently, already scrolling through emails. His presence became a ghost in their own home, there, but unreachable. One evening, as rain whispered against the windows again, Clara sat, curled on the couch, a pregnancy book open on her lap. Her belly had just begun to swell, a gentle curve that made her feel both vulnerable and powerful. She looked up as Marcos walked in, briefcase in hand, tie loose. "Hey," she said softly, hope flickering like a candle in the dark. "I felt them move today." He paused, halfway to the kitchen. For a heartbeat, she thought he might sit beside her. Maybe touch her stomach. Maybe say something tender. Instead, he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Clara, I've got a huge presentation tomorrow. Can we talk about this later?" "It's not this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's our children. 3 of them. They're real, Marcos. They're already part of us." He turned then, and his eyes, once so warm, were sharp with something she didn't recognize. "Frustration? Resentment? Real," he echoed, voice low. "They're cells, Clara. Beautiful, yes, but they're also a massive responsibility. Do you even realize what 3 infants mean? No sleep. No career. No freedom. My boss is watching me like a hawk. If I slip up, someone else gets that VP seat. And now this." Her breath caught. "This? You call your own children this?" "I call it reality," he snapped, then immediately softened, running a hand over his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. It's just everything's happening too fast." But it wasn't too fast. It was unfolding exactly as life does, with messy, beautiful urgency. The next morning, Clara found him packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" she asked, standing in the doorway, one hand resting on her growing belly. "To Daniel's," he said without looking up. "Just for a few days. I need space to think." "Space?" Her voice cracked. "From me? Or from them?" He zipped the bag shut. Finally, he met her eyes, but his gaze slid past her stomach, as if afraid to look directly at the truth it held. "I never asked for this, Clara," he said quietly. "I wanted a family, yes, but not like this. Not triplets. Not now." The words landed like ice water down her spine. "You didn't ask for them," she whispered, tears welling. "But they're here, and they need a father." "I can't be the father they deserve if I'm drowning," he replied, picking up his bag. "I'll call you." And just like that, he walked out. Days turned into weeks. His calls grew shorter, then stopped altogether. The silence from him was louder than any argument. Clara sat alone in their bed one night, clutching the ultrasound photo, the first image of her 3 tiny miracles, curled together like petals in a bud. She traced their outlines with her finger, whispering names she'd chosen in secret: Elena, Matteo, Sophia. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent life. Inside, her heart ached with a loneliness so deep it felt like falling. Yet, even in that void, something else stirred, not just fear, but resolve. She stood, walked to the mirror, and placed both hands on her belly. Her reflection showed tired eyes, yes, but also a quiet fire. "You're all I need," she told them, voice steady now. "And I will never leave you." In that moment, Clara stopped waiting for Marcos to return. She began preparing, not just for motherhood, but for survival. She researched maternity benefits, updated her resume between bouts of nausea, and started setting aside every spare coin. Because she knew now, love wasn't always returned. But it could still be given, fiercely, fully, without condition. And hers would be enough. Even if his wasn't. The apartment no longer felt like a home they'd built together. It was becoming something new, a sanctuary for 4 souls who would rise, not because they were chosen, but because they chose each other. Alone but unbroken. Pregnant but powerful. And though Marcos was gone, Clara was more present than ever. In every heartbeat, every kick, every silent promise whispered in the dark. She wasn't just carrying babies. She was carrying hope. She began to find a fragile rhythm. Morning walks, gentle music for the babies, journaling their kicks. Another blow landed. It was a Tuesday. Rain again. She walked into her office, cheeks flushed from the cold, clutching a folder of updated maternity leave paperwork. Her boss, Ms. Delaney, sat behind her sleek glass desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. "Clara," she said without preamble. Sit down. Clara's stomach dropped. Not from the babies this time, from dread. I know you've been doing your best, Ms. Delaney began, voice carefully neutral. But with the restructuring and your condition, the board feels your role requires full availability. Especially now with the Henderson account. Clara blinked. I've been meeting every deadline. I even finished the pitch deck last week. And we appreciate that, Ms. Delaney cut in gently, too gently. But with triplets, they're concerned you won't be able to return to the same capacity. The travel, the hours, it's not sustainable. Clara's hands trembled in her lap. So you're letting me go? We're offering a generous severance, came the reply, smooth as polished stone. And a letter of recommendation. A letter, as if that could pay for diapers. For formula. For the crib she hadn't even bought yet. She stood slowly, her breath shallow. I gave 3 years to this company. I missed birthdays, holidays, my own health. And now, because I'm having children, you're discarding me like I'm broken? Ms. Delaney looked away. It's business, Clara. Nothing personal. But it felt like everything. She walked out without another word, her coat pulled tight around her swelling frame. Outside, the city blurred. Through tears. She didn't cry loudly, just silent, hot streams tracing paths down her cheeks as she stood on the sidewalk, utterly alone in a crowd. That night, curled on the couch with a heating pad on her back, she stared at her phone. No messages. No calls. Not even from her mother, who lived 3 states away and barely understood what she was going through. Then a notification. An email. From an unknown sender. Her thumb hovered over it, heart pounding. She opened it. Dear Clara, I heard what happened. From mutual friends. I also heard about your situation at home. If you're open to it, I'd like to offer you a position at the Evergreen Foundation. Part-time, flexible hours, remote options. You'd oversee our community outreach program. Your empathy and organizational skills are exactly what we need. No pressure. Just know someone sees you. Dr. Elias. Clara read it 3 times. Dr. Elias. Her former boss from her first job out of college. The one who'd mentored her, who'd once told her, you have the kind of strength that builds bridges, not walls. She hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. Her hands shook as she typed a reply. Thank you. I'd be honored to talk. 2 days later, they met in a quiet cafe. Dr. Elias, silver-haired, calm-eyed, wearing the same worn leather satchel she remembered, rose as she entered, his face lighting with genuine warmth. Clara, he said, pulling out her chair. You look radiant. She almost laughed through tears. I feel like I'm falling apart. He leaned forward, voice low and steady. Then let me help you rebuild. Not just your career, but your confidence. You're not a liability because you're carrying life. You're a miracle walking among us. For the first time in months, Clara felt seen. Not as a problem, not as a burden, but as a person worthy of support. She accepted the offer that afternoon. But as she walked home, a new fear crept in. What if Marcos finds out? What if he comes back? Not out of love, but out of guilt or curiosity. What if he tries to claim a role in their lives after vanishing when it mattered most? She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling 3 tiny flutters in response. No, she whispered to the wind. Not this time. We protect our peace. Still, deep down, a question lingered like a shadow. One night at 32 weeks, sharp pain shot through her abdomen like lightning. She gasped, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter as dizziness washed over her. The babies, kicking wildly as if sensing danger, sent panic racing through her veins. Not yet, she whispered, sliding to the floor. Please, not yet. She called an ambulance with trembling fingers, voice barely steady enough to give her address. At the hospital, monitors beeped in frantic rhythm as nurses rushed around her. You're in preterm labor, the doctor said, face grim. We'll do everything we can to stop it, but you need to stay off your feet. Complete bed rest. Clara's heart sank. But your job is to keep these babies inside as long as possible, the nurse cut in gently, adjusting the 4. Everything else can wait. Everything else. But rent couldn't wait. Neither could groceries, or the mountain of medical bills already piling up. That evening, as rain tapped against the hospital window, her phone buzzed. It was Dr. Elias. How are you? He asked, voice thick with concern. They might come early, she choked out, tears finally spilling over. I can't work. I can't even stand. And I don't know how I'll pay for any of this. There was a pause. Then, calm as sunrise. You listen to me, Clara. Your only job right now is to breathe, rest, and grow those miracles. The foundation will cover your medical copays. And your salary? It stays intact. Full pay. No questions. She sobbed then, not from fear, but from the sheer, staggering weight of being cared for. But why? She whispered. You don't owe me this. I owe you nothing, he said softly. But humanity does. And sometimes one person stepping in is all it takes to change a life. Let me be that person. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by wires and worry, Clara felt something shift inside her. A knot of shame unraveling, replaced by something rare and precious, trust. She stayed in the hospital for 10 days. 10 days of silence from the outside world. 10 days of talking to her babies, singing lullabies, imagining their faces. When she finally returned home, the apartment was spotless. Groceries filled the fridge. A note on the table read, "Rest. We've got you," signed with a simple E. But peace was fragile. One afternoon, while scrolling through old photos, trying to remember the woman she'd been before all this, she saw it. A post from Marcos. Not a message. Not a call. Just a photo on social media. Him at some rooftop party, champagne in hand, arm around a woman Clara didn't recognize. Caption. New chapter. Finally free. The words struck like glass shards. Free. As if love were a cage. As if fatherhood were a sentence. Her hands shook. She wanted to scream. To throw her phone against the wall. Instead, she took a deep breath, placed both palms on her belly, and felt 3 strong kicks in return. As if her children were saying, "We're still here. We choose you." She deleted the app that day. But the image haunted her. Because freedom, she realized, wasn't about walking away. It was about staying, even when it hurt. Even when it cost everything. And she had stayed. Now, as her due date loomed closer, a new kind of tension settled in her bones. Not just physical, but emotional. She'd survived abandonment. She'd weathered job loss. She'd faced the terror of losing her babies too soon. But what came next? Motherhood. Real, raw, relentless motherhood. With no partner, no safety net beyond one kind man who believed in her. And somewhere out there, a man who once called her mine was living as if she, and their children, had never existed. Would he ever wonder about them? Would he see their eyes in a stranger's face and feel a pang he couldn't explain? Or would he simply move on, unburdened, while she carried the weight of 3 lives, and the ghost of a love that vanished without warning? She didn't know. All she knew was this. When her water broke 2 weeks later, in the middle of a quiet Tuesday morning, she didn't call anyone in panic. She called Dr. Elias. And when he arrived within minutes, calm and steady, holding her hand as contractions rolled through her like thunder, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving." He squeezed her hand. Some people don't leave, Clara. They show up. Hours later, under soft hospital lights, Elena, Mateo, and Sophia entered the world. Tiny, perfect, screaming with life. Clara held them one by one, tears streaming down her face, not from pain, but from awe. They were here, and they were hers. But as she gazed at their newborn faces, a quiet question echoed in the silence. Will he ever know what he missed? And deeper still, the unspoken fear. What if he tries to come back, just to take them away? Milk dripping from a bottle, wondering if she'd ever feel like herself again. But then, there were other moments. Like when Elena gripped her finger with surprising strength. When Mateo smiled in his sleep, as if dreaming of stars. When Sophia's eyes, deep brown like Marcos's, locked onto hers with quiet recognition, as if to say, "I know you. You're mine." And through it all, Dr. Elias never overstepped. He brought groceries, yes. Fixed the leaky faucet. Sat quietly in the living room while she nursed, reading reports or simply offering silent company. He never stayed past dinner. Never made her feel indebted. Only seen. Only supported. One rainy afternoon, when the babies were 6 months old and finally sleeping in longer stretches, Clara stood at the kitchen sink, washing bottles, when Dr. Elias arrived with a stack of files. "The Evergreen Gala is in 3 months," he said gently, placing a brochure on the counter. "We're launching the New Roots initiative, housing and education for single mothers. And I want you to lead it." Clara froze, a bottle dripping in her hand. "Me? But I haven't even been back to the office." "You've lived it," he said, meeting her eyes. "You didn't just survive, you rebuilt. That's more powerful than any resume. People need to hear your story." Her throat tightened. "My story? The part where I was left alone, jobless, terrified. The part where you chose hope anyway," he corrected softly. "That's the part that changes lives." She looked toward the nursery, where soft coos drifted from the monitor. Her children, her triumphs, were napping peacefully, unaware of the world beyond their crib rails. What if someone from my past sees it? She whispered, voice barely audible. What if he sees it? Dr. Elias didn't flinch. Then let him see what real strength looks like. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the patter of rain and the distant gurgle of a baby waking. I'm scared, she admitted, finally turning to face him, eyes glistening. Not of speaking, but of opening that door again. What if seeing me happy makes him think he can just walk back in? He can't, Dr. Elias said firmly. Not unless you invite him. And even then, he'll have to earn the right to stand in the same room as those children. Not because you owe him anything, but because they deserve to know their father, if he's willing to be one. Clara swallowed hard. The thought twisted inside her. Not anger, not longing, but a deep, protective ache. She loved her children too much to let bitterness poison them. But she loved them too much to risk their hearts on a man who once walked away without looking back. I'll do it, she said at last, voice steadier now. I'll speak at the gala. Dr. Elias nodded, a small, proud smile touching his lips. Good, because the world needs to see what happens when a woman refuses to break. In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself into the project. She met with architects designing safe housing units. She interviewed mothers who'd escaped abusive situations, their stories echoing her own in haunting harmony. She wrote her speech late at night, after the babies slept, pouring her truth onto paper, not as a victim, but as a witness. And yet, beneath the growing confidence, a thread of unease remained. Because fame, even the quiet kind, has a way of drawing ghosts out of the shadows. One evening, while rehearsing her speech in front of the mirror, Elena babbled happily in her bouncer. Sophia chewed on a teething ring, and Matteo stared up at her with wide, curious eyes. Clara practiced her opening line. 2 years ago, I stood alone in an empty apartment, carrying 3 lives and no idea how I'd keep them safe. Her voice caught. She took a breath, touched her chest, and tried again. This time stronger. But as she spoke, a strange feeling settled over her, a premonition, subtle as a whisper. He'll be there. Not because he cared, but because men like him always show up when someone else is being celebrated for surviving what they caused. And if he did, would he recognize the woman on that stage? Or would he only see the ghost of the girl he left behind? She didn't know. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the answer. Because this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. She'd be standing with her children. And with a truth so bright, it could burn through even the deepest denial. Weaving through the air like a promise. Clara stood backstage, heart pounding so hard she feared it might drown out the orchestra. She adjusted the emerald green dress Dr. Elias had insisted she wear. You deserve to shine, he'd said, and smoothed her hands over the fabric, trying to calm the tremor in her fingers. Behind her, in a quiet corner watched over by a trusted nanny, Elena, Matteo, and Sophia slept in matching strollers, wrapped in soft blankets, blissfully unaware of the storm about to unfold. You're ready, Dr. Elias murmured, appearing beside her. He didn't touch her shoulder, never did, but his presence was an anchor. They need to hear this. He needs to hear this, even if he doesn't know it yet. Clara's breath hitched. Do you think he'll be here? Dr. Elias hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I don't know, but if he is, let your truth be your shield, not your weapon. Before she could respond, the MC's voice echoed through the hall. And now, please welcome the visionary behind the New Roots initiative, a woman who turned abandonment into advocacy, fear into fortitude. Ms. Clara Mendez. Applause swelled. Clara closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Then she stepped into the light. The stage was vast, the audience a blur of faces. But as she approached the podium, her gaze swept the room and froze. There, near the back, half hidden behind a marble column, stood Marcos. He looked older, sharper, his suit expensive, his posture rigid. But his eyes, wide, stunned, locked onto hers with the force of a collision. Panic flared in his chest. She saw it. The way his hand jerked toward his tie, the way his breath caught. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected her, not like this. Not radiant. Not commanding. Not with 3 children waiting just off stage. But Clara didn't falter. She took the microphone, her voice clear, steady, carrying across the silent room. 2 years ago, she began, I was told I was too much. Too pregnant. Too demanding. Too much of a risk. And so I was left alone, jobless, terrified, with 3 lives growing inside me and no idea how I'd keep them safe. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcos didn't move. He couldn't. But what they didn't understand, she continued, her voice softening but gaining strength, is that love doesn't shrink under pressure. It expands. It finds cracks in the darkest walls and grows through them. And sometimes, it finds you when you've given up on being found. She glanced toward the wings, where her children slept. A small, private smile touched her lips. I didn't just survive those months. I learned to thrive. Not because I'm extraordinary, but because ordinary women do extraordinary things every day when there's no one else to do them. She paused, letting the words settle. Then her gaze drifted back, not to Marcos, but past him, as if speaking to every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. My children taught me that family isn't defined by who stays. It's defined by who shows up, who chooses every single day to love without conditions. Marcos's face had gone pale. He looked around as if searching for an exit, but the crowd was too dense, the moment too heavy. He was trapped, not by walls, but by the weight of his own choices. Clara's voice rose, not in anger, but in quiet triumph. So tonight, I stand here not as a victim of abandonment, but as a testament to resilience. To the mothers who feed their babies with empty cupboards and full hearts. To the ones who cry in the shower so their children won't see. To the ones who rebuild, brick by brick, from the rubble of someone else's cowardice. Tears glistened in the eyes of women throughout the room. Some clutched their partner's hands. Others sat alone, nodding silently, as if finally being seen. And to anyone watching who once walked away thinking you were doing the right thing. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper, yet it carried like thunder. I hope you see what you left behind. Not just me, but them. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the wings. The nanny on cue wheeled the strollers forward. Just enough for the audience to see 3 small faces, peaceful in sleep. Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. Marcos staggered back a step, his hand flying to his mouth. His children. His children. Real. Alive. Beautiful. And he had missed everything. Their first cries, their first smiles, their first steps. Clara didn't look at him again. She didn't need to. She finished her speech with grace, with fire, with tears in her own eyes, but not of sorrow. Of release. As applause erupted, thunderous, standing, reverent, she stepped down, walking straight to her children. She knelt, kissed each forehead, and whispered, "You're my forever." Behind her, the crowd parted like a sea. And there, in the center of it all, stood Marcos, exposed, trembling, utterly undone. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Because for the first time, he understood. He hadn't just abandoned a wife. He'd abandoned a future. And now it was standing right in front of him. Unreachable, unbroken, and man standing frozen near the column, his face a mask of shock and shame. She walked toward the exit with Dr. Elias at her side, his presence a silent fortress. But Marcos moved. He pushed through. The lingering guests, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. "Clara, wait!" His voice cracked, raw, desperate, stripped of the control he'd worn like armor for years. She stopped. Not because she owed him anything, but because her children deserved to know the truth, even if it began with a single word. She turned slowly, still holding Sophia against her chest. Elena and Mateo nestled in the double stroller beside her. Her eyes met his, not with anger, not with longing, but with a calm so deep it seemed to unsettle him further. "You left," she said simply. No accusation. Just fact. "I didn't know," he began, breathless. "I didn't think. I thought you'd move on. Find someone else. I never imagined you'd be here like this." "Like what?" she asked, voice steady. "Strong. Capable. Happy." He flinched. I saw the invitation and came for networking. I had no idea you'd be speaking. No idea about them." Clara looked down at Sophia, who blinked up at her with wide, curious eyes that mirrored his own. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You walked away from ultrasounds, from doctor's appointments, from sleepless nights and first kicks," she said softly. "You missed their births, their first smiles, their first words. You don't get to show up now because you're surprised they exist." Marcos's hands clenched at his sides. "I made a mistake. A terrible one. But I'm their father, Clara. Don't I have a right to? A right?" She cut him off, her voice sharpening just enough to draw blood. "Rights come with responsibility. And you chose none of it. You chose silence. You chose absence. You chose yourself over them. He looked at the ground, shame burning in his cheeks. I was scared. I thought I'd ruin everything. That I wasn't ready. We're never ready, she said, softer now. But we show up anyway. That's what love is. Dr. Elias stepped forward then, not aggressively, but with quiet authority. Marcos, he said, using his name deliberately. If you truly want to be part of their lives, it starts with humility. Not demands. Not expectations. It starts with asking her, not claiming. Marcos swallowed hard, his gaze flickering between Clara and the children. Can I just hold one? Just once. Clara hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say no, to shield her babies from the man who vanished when they needed him most. But as she looked at Mateo, who was now staring at Marcos with innocent curiosity, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but possibility. She nodded once. 1 minute. And you sit. He sank onto a nearby velvet bench, hands trembling as Clara gently placed Mateo in his arms. The baby cooed, reaching for Marcos's tie with tiny fingers. And in that moment, something broke inside him. Tears welled in his eyes, real, unguarded tears. He held his son like he was holding glass, like he was afraid he might shatter him, or himself. He's perfect, Marcos whispered, voice thick. Yes, Clara said. They all are. He looked up at her, eyes pleading. Is there any way, any chance I could earn your trust? Even a little. She studied him, the man who once called her my future. Now reduced to a stranger begging for scraps of grace. I don't know, she admitted honestly. But if you're serious, you start by respecting my boundaries. No sudden visits. No grand gestures. You show up consistently. Quietly. For them. Not for your guilt. He nodded rapidly, cradling Mateo like a prayer. I will. I swear. As the minute ended, Clara took her son back. Marcos didn't resist. He stood slowly, wiping his eyes, straightening his suit as if trying to reclaim some dignity. I'll contact my lawyer, he said quietly. To formalize visitation, whatever you're comfortable with. Clara gave a small nod. Do it through mine. He turned to leave, then paused. Clara, thank you. For letting me see them. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because the real work hadn't begun yet. Later that night, back in her apartment, the city lights shimmering beyond the window, Clara rocked Sophia to sleep while Elena and Mateo napped in their cribs. Dr. Elias sat in the armchair, sipping tea, watching her with quiet admiration. You handled that beautifully, he said. I didn't do it for him, she murmured. I did it for them. They deserve to know where they come from, even if the story isn't pretty. He smiled faintly. You're an incredible mother. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not pity, not desire, but unwavering respect. And you're the reason I didn't drown. No, he corrected gently. You saved yourself. I just handed you a rope. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside that quiet apartment, something new had taken root. Not reconciliation, not yet, but the fragile, terrifying seed of second chances. No baby cries. No lullabies. No soft footsteps in the hall. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of his own regret. He kept replaying it, Mateo's tiny fingers gripping his tie. The weight of his son in his arms, so light, yet heavier than any deal he'd ever closed. The way Clara looked at him, not with hatred, but with weary clarity, as if she'd already mourned him long ago. His phone buzzed on the glass table. A message from his assistant. Great job at the gala, sir. The Henderson Group loved your presence. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. They thought he'd been there to network. They had no idea he'd just stared into the eyes of the life he threw away. He opened his laptop, fingers trembling as he typed Clara's name into the search bar. Article after article. Appeared, Clara Mendez. From abandonment to advocacy. Triplets inspire new social initiative. The woman who rebuilt after being left behind. He clicked on a video. There she was on stage, radiant, commanding, speaking about resilience while her children slept peacefully off stage. She wasn't the woman he remembered. She was more. Stronger. Whole. And he hadn't been there for any of it. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Lena, his younger sister, holding 2 coffees. You look like hell, she said bluntly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I saw them, he whispered, voice raw. My kids. They're real. Lena set the coffee down and crossed her arms. You knew they existed, Marcos. You just chose to pretend they didn't. I was scared, he snapped, running both hands through his hair. I thought I'd ruin them. That I wasn't cut out to be a father, especially to 3. And now, she asked quietly. Now I see what I lost, he said, sinking onto the couch, head in his hands. She didn't need me to survive. She thrived without me. And that kills me more than anything. Lena sat beside him. Then stop trying to fix it for you. Do it for them. Show up. Not with money. Not with excuses. With time. With humility. He looked at her, eyes glistening. What if she never lets me in? Then you keep showing up anyway, Lena said firmly. Because love isn't about getting what you want. It's about giving what's needed. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. The next morning, instead of heading to his office, Marcos went to a bookstore. He bought 3 children's books, Goodnight Moon, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and Guess How Much I Love You. He wrapped them carefully, wrote a simple note. For Elena, Mateo, and Sofia. From Dad. And left them at the foundation's front desk with instructions to deliver them only if Clara approved. He didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, his phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was calm, measured. They like the books, she said. Mateo carries Caterpillar everywhere. Marcos's breath caught. Can I read it to him sometime? In person. A pause. Long enough to make his heart stop. We'll start with supervised visits, she said finally. At the foundation. 1 hour. Saturdays. If you're late once, it's over. I won't be, he said quickly. I swear. Don't swear, she replied softly. Just show up. He hung up and stood by the window again, but this time the city didn't feel cold. It felt full of possibility. That Saturday, he arrived 20 minutes early, dressed not in a suit, but in a soft sweater and jeans. He brought no gifts, just himself. When Clara walked in with the triplets, his heart hammered against his ribs. Elena hid behind Clara's leg. Sofia stared at him with wide, curious eyes. Mateo, clutching the Caterpillar book, took a tentative step forward. Marcos knelt slowly, keeping his distance. Hi, buddy, he whispered. Mateo held up the book. Again. Marcos nodded, throat tight. Yeah, buddy. Again. As he began to read, voice shaky at first, then steadier, Clara watched from the doorway. Not with suspicion, but with cautious hope. Because healing doesn't happen in grand declarations. It happens in quiet moments. In a shared story. In a child's trusting gaze. And in a father who finally learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. 15 minutes early, always in simple clothes, never with gifts beyond his presence. He read books, built block towers that collapsed more often than they stood, and learned, painstakingly, the unique language of each child. Elena, cautious and observant, would watch him from across the room for the first 20 minutes before inching closer, her tiny hand eventually reaching for his sleeve. Sofia, bold and bright-eyed, would babble at him in a stream of sounds only she understood, demanding his full attention. And Mateo, his little anchor, would crawl into his lap without hesitation, as if some deep cellular memory recognized the man who shared his blood. Clara watched from a nearby table, pretending to review grant proposals, but her eyes rarely left them. She saw the way Marcos's hands trembled the first time Elena let him hold her. She saw how he stayed late one afternoon just to watch Sofia take her first unsteady steps toward him, his face breaking into a smile so raw it nearly undid her. But trust wasn't built in moments, it was tested in silence. One rainy Saturday, as thunder rolled outside, Mateo startled awake from a nap, crying inconsolably. Clara moved to pick him up, but Marcos was faster. He scooped the boy into his arms, rocking gently, humming a tuneless melody Clara had never heard before. Shoo, it's okay, he murmured, pressing his cheek to Mateo's damp curls. I've got you. And miraculously, the crying stopped. Mateo nestled into his chest, fingers clutching his shirt like a lifeline. Clara froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. That sound, the hum, it was the same lullaby she used to sing when she was overwhelmed, a melody her own mother had taught her. How did he know it? Later, as the children napped in their travel cribs, she asked quietly, Where did you learn that song? Marcos looked down, fiddling with the edge of his sweater. You used to sing it, back when we first moved in together. When I'd come home stressed from work, you'd hum it while making tea. I didn't realize I remembered until today. Her breath caught. He remembered. Not the big things, the promotions, the vacations, but the quiet, intimate details. The kind that live in. The bones of a shared life. A dangerous warmth flickered in her chest. She pushed it down. Don't mistake consistency for redemption, she said softly, more to herself than to him. He met her gaze, eyes clear. I'm not asking for redemption. I'm just trying to be someone they can count on. She nodded, but inside a new fear stirred. Not of him leaving again, but of herself softening too soon. What if this was just another performance? What if he walked away the moment it became inconvenient? The answer came sooner than she expected. One Tuesday evening, her phone rang. It was Dr. Elias. "Clara, I need to tell you something," he said, voice unusually tense. Marcos submitted a formal proposal to the board. He wants to fund the entire New Roots housing project, fully anonymously. But he insisted I tell you it's his way of making amends. She went still. "Why?" He said, "Because they deserve stability. And I owe them that much." She hung up and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Rain began to fall again, gentle, persistent. The next Saturday, she didn't mention the donation. But as Marcos helped Sophia stack blocks, she watched him closely. There was no pride in his posture, no expectation of praise. Just quiet focus on the small hands guiding his own. At the end of the visit, as he prepared to leave, she stopped him. "Why now?" she asked. "Why all this effort?" He turned, raincoat in hand, eyes searching hers. "Because I looked at Mateo last week and realized, I don't want him to grow up wondering if his father ever tried. I don't want any of them to carry that question." He paused, voice dropping. "And because when I see you, I see everything I threw away. Not just a wife, a partner, a future. And I can't get that back. But maybe I can earn a place in theirs." Clara didn't answer. She just nodded, and for the first time, she didn't watch him leave with suspicion. She watched him go with something far more dangerous, hope. Clara's stomach tightened. The Henderson Group, the very firm Marcos had spent years climbing through, the one that had once valued him more than his own family. She typed back quickly. "Only if you won't be there." Dr. Elias replied moments later. "I've confirmed with their office. Marcos resigned last month. He's not affiliated anymore." Relief washed over her, so deep it made her knees weak. She said yes. But what neither she nor Dr. Elias knew was that Marcos hadn't just left Henderson. He'd started his own consulting firm, and his first major client was none other than Daniel Reeves, a senior partner at Henderson who'd always admired his ruthless efficiency. And Daniel, eager to impress, had personally added Marcos to the guest list as a special advisor. The day of the summit arrived under a sky so clear it felt like fate holding its breath. Clara stood backstage in a sleek conference hall downtown, adjusting her blazer, rehearsing her opening lines. Elena, Mateo, and Sophia were at home with a trusted babysitter. This wasn't a gala, it was business. She'd be in and out in under an hour. "You've got this," Dr. Elias murmured, handing her a bottle of water. "They're going to love it." She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The room was smaller than the gala, more intimate, more intense. Rows of sharp-suited executives leaned forward as she began speaking about housing insecurity, maternal resilience, and the transformative power of community support. Her voice was steady, her passion undeniable. Halfway through her presentation, she scanned the audience and froze. There, in the third row, sat Marcos. Not hiding this time. Not lurking in the shadows. Sitting upright, eyes locked on her, expression unreadable. Her throat went dry. Her next sentence faltered. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, because quitting now would mean letting him still control the narrative. She steadied herself, gripped the edges of the podium, and continued, her voice stronger now, laced with quiet defiance. Marcos didn't look away. He listened, really listened, as if hearing her for the first time. After her talk, applause filled the room. As she stepped down, Daniel Reeves approached, beaming. "Brilliant work, Clara. And you," he turned to Marcos, "you were right. She's extraordinary." Marcos didn't answer. His eyes never left Clara. She turned to leave, but he stepped into her path. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. She glanced at Dr. Elias, who gave a subtle nod from across the room. "I'm here if you need me." "1 minute," she said. They walked to a quiet alcove near the elevators, away from the mingling crowd. "You lied," she said without preamble. "You told them you weren't coming." "I didn't know I was," he admitted. "Daniel added me last minute. I tried to decline, but he insisted." "I swear, Clara, I didn't come here to disrupt you." "Then why are you here?" she challenged, arms crossed. He hesitated, then met her gaze. "Because I needed to see you do this. To hear you speak about building something beautiful from broken pieces. And know that I was the one who broke it." His honesty startled her. "And," she pressed, And I wanted you to know, I turned down a partnership at Henderson last month, he said quietly, because I realized I was chasing success to fill a void I created myself. I don't want that life anymore. She studied him, the shadows under his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, the absence of the old arrogance. Your presence here changes nothing, she said finally. My work stands on its own. I know, he said. I'm not here for credit. I'm here because I miss them more than I thought possible. A silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was the babysitter. Clara? Mateo has a fever. 102, he keeps asking for data. The word hit them both like a physical blow. Marcos's face paled. Is he okay? He's fine, Clara said into the phone, eyes still on Marcos. I'll be home soon. She hung up. I should go, she said. Can I come with you? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Just to check on him? I won't stay. I won't overstep. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the man who abandoned her, but a father terrified of losing another moment. No, she said softly. But you can call tonight. After 8. If he's awake, I'll let you say goodnight. His eyes filled with tears, not of manipulation, but of gratitude. Thank you, he breathed. As she walked away, she didn't look back. But for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt something far more complicated. The slow, uncertain thaw of a heart learning to trust again. Not blindly, but drifting through the baby monitor like distant lullabies. Clara sat beside him, damp cloth in hand, heart pounding not from worry, but from anticipation. 8 o'clock. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over Marcos's contact. She didn't call him. She'd said he could call her. And so she waited. At 8:02 p.m., the phone rang. She answered on the first ring. Is he? Marcos's voice was tight, stripped of all pretense. He's resting, she said softly. Fever's down to 100.6. He asked for you again. A pause. Then, barely a whisper. Can I talk to him? She looked at Mateo. His eyes fluttered open, glassy but alert. Dada, he murmured. Clara pressed the phone gently to his ear. Hey, buddy, Marcos said, voice cracking instantly. It's me. Mateo blinked slowly. You sick too? Marcos let out a choked laugh. No, little man. But I'm thinking about you. You be brave for Mama, okay? Mama's sad, Mateo whispered. Clara's breath caught. I know, Marcos said softer now. But you make her happy. And that makes me happy too. Mateo yawned, eyelids drooping. Love you, Dada. I love you too, Mateo. More than stars. The words hung in the air, simple, sacred, irreversible. Clara took the phone back as Mateo drifted off again. He's asleep, she said. Thank you, Marcos breathed, for letting me hear his voice. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but thick with everything they couldn't say. Then quietly, I keep dreaming about the day I left, he admitted. I see you standing in the doorway, holding your stomach, and I just walk away. Every time, I wake up wanting to run back. But I can't. Time doesn't work like that. No, Clara agreed, voice low. It doesn't. But what if, he hesitated. What if I could prove I'm not that man anymore? Not just to you, to them? You already are, she said, surprising even herself. Every Saturday, every book you read, every time you show up on time. That's who you are now. Not the man who left. The man who came back. He exhaled shakily. Does that mean there's hope? She looked at Mateo's peaceful face, then toward the hallway where her other 2 children slept. Their lives whole, not because of perfection, but because of presence. I don't know, she said honestly. But I do know this. They deserve a father who stays. Not one who visits when it's convenient. I'll stay, he said fiercely. Even if it takes years. Even if you never trust me fully. I'll stay. Tears pricked her eyes, not from sadness, but from the terrifying beauty of second chances. Then keep showing up, Marcos, she whispered. Not for me. For them. I will, he promised. Every single day. They hung up without saying goodbye, because somehow the conversation wasn't over. It had just begun. Later that night, as rain began to patter against the windows, Clara stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching her 3 children sleep. Safe. Loved. Whole. And for the first time since that rainy autumn morning 2 years ago, she didn't feel alone. She felt witnessed. Not by a crowd. Not by applause. But by a man who had finally learned to see her, and their children, not as burdens, but as blessings he'd almost lost forever. Outside, the city slept. But inside, something new stirred, a fragile, flickering light. Silently beside Elena until she finally offered him a crayon-drawn picture titled My Daddy. One afternoon, as cherry blossoms drifted past the window, Clara found him in the living room, building a wobbly tower of blocks with Matteo while Elena read him a story from a picture book upside down. The sight should have felt foreign. Instead, it felt natural. Too natural. That night, after the children were asleep, she stood at the sink washing bottles, her mind tangled. Dr. Elias had called earlier that day with news. The New Roots project was expanding, and they wanted her to lead a national pilot program. It meant travel, longer hours, more responsibility, and more reliance on others, including Marcos. She hadn't told him yet, but life has a way of forcing decisions before we're ready. The next morning, as she packed lunches, her phone buzzed, a message from the pediatrician's office. Reminder, Triplets 2-year checkup tomorrow at 10 a.m. Her stomach dropped. She had a critical meeting with donors at the same time. Before she could panic, another message popped up, this time from Marcos. I'm free tomorrow morning. If you need backup at the appointment, I'm here. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Letting him take them alone? It was the ultimate test. She typed back. You'd have to handle everything. Shots, questions, forms. Are you sure? His reply was immediate. I've been studying their medical files for months. I know their allergies, their milestones, their favorite distractions post-vaccine. Let me do this. The next day, she watched from the hallway as Marcos knelt in front of the triplets, speaking calmly. Okay, team. Today we go see Dr. Lee. She's super nice, but she might give you a tiny poke to keep you strong. Afterward, ice cream. Sophia clapped. Elena hid behind his leg. Matteo nodded solemnly. Brave. Clara's throat tightened. At the clinic, she lingered in the waiting area, pretending to read emails, but really watching through the glass partition. She saw Marcos hold Elena's hand during her shots, whispering encouragement. She saw him distract Sophia with silly faces. She saw him cradle Matteo afterward, murmuring, You're my hero, as tears streamed down his own cheeks. When it was over, the nurse handed him a stack of updated records. He signed every form with careful precision, asked thoughtful questions about speech development, and thanked the staff by name. As they walked out, the children clinging to his hands, he looked up and saw her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he smiled, small and unsure. They were amazing. She stepped forward, taking Sophia's other hand. You were too. And in that simple exchange, in the shared weight of responsibility, in the quiet pride in his eyes, something shifted. Not because he'd done something grand, but because he'd done something ordinary, and shown up for it completely. Later that evening, as she tucked Matteo into bed, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes. Dada, stay. She brushed his hair back. He's learning how. Love him, Matteo whispered. Tears filled her eyes. I know, baby. I'm trying. Clara's breath caught. This wasn't just another event. This was the night the Foundation would announce the national expansion of New Roots, a project that could change thousands of lives. And they wanted her front and center. She showed the invitation to Dr. Elias over coffee the next morning. They want me to bring the kids, she said, tracing the embossed lettering with her thumb. Says it'll humanize the mission. He smiled gently. Because you are the mission, Clara. But beneath the pride, a cold thread of anxiety coiled in her chest. The gala would be bigger than the last. More press. More high-profile guests. And though Marcos had proven himself week after week, this was different. This was public. Permanent. That evening, as she bathed the triplets, Matteo splashed water with glee while Sophia tried to wash Elena's hair with a rubber duck. The ordinary joy of it grounded her, until her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Marcos. I saw the gala announcement online. Can I come? Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed, deleted, typed again. It's not about you. His reply came instantly. I know, but it's about them. And you. And I'd be honored to witness it, even from the back row. She didn't answer right away. Later, after bedtime stories and final goodnight kisses, she sat alone in the dim living room, the invitation resting on her lap. The truth settled over her like a heavy coat. She wasn't afraid of him showing up. She was afraid of what it would mean if he did. Because if he stood in that room, not as a ghost from her past, but as a present, steady force in their children's lives, it would mean something irreversible. It would mean healing wasn't just possible. It was already happening. The night of the gala arrived under a sky dusted with stars. Clara stood backstage in a deep sapphire gown, her hair swept into a soft knot, heart pounding as the orchestra swelled. The triplets, dressed in matching ivory outfits, played quietly with soft toys nearby, watched over by a nanny and Dr. Elias. "You look radiant," Dr. Elias murmured, adjusting her mic. She managed a small smile. "I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff." "Good," he said. "That means you're alive." Then, from the wings, she saw him. Marcos. Not in the back row, but standing near the front, dressed in a simple black suit, eyes fixed on the stage with an expression she'd never seen before. Awe. Reverence. Love, pure and unguarded. Their eyes met across the space. No words. No gestures. Just a silent understanding passing between them. "This is real. This is ours." The MC's voice filled the hall. "Please welcome the woman who taught us that broken beginnings can lead to beautiful legacies, Ms. Clara Mendez." Applause erupted as she stepped into the light. She walked to the podium, her gaze sweeping the room, but always returning to him. To them. She began to speak, her voice clear and strong, weaving her story of loss, resilience, and the unexpected grace of second chances. She spoke of single mothers working double shifts, of children sleeping in shelters, of communities rebuilt brick by brick. And then she paused. "I used to believe love was a promise," she said, voice softening. "But I've learned it's a practice. It's showing up when it's hard. It's choosing someone, even after they've hurt you, because their growth matters more than your fear." Her eyes found Marcos again. He hadn't moved. Tears glistened in his eyes. "And sometimes," she continued, "it's letting someone back in, not because they deserve it, but because your children deserve to see what forgiveness looks like." A hush fell over the room. She turned slightly, gesturing to the wings. "These three souls taught me that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about choosing each other, every single day." The nanny wheeled the strollers forward. The crowd gasped, not at their beauty, but at the sheer, quiet power of their existence. Marcos stood slowly, not to leave, but to honor them. One by one, others rose too, until the entire room was on its feet, applauding not just her words, but the living proof of them. As the ovation swelled, Clara stepped down from the podium and walked straight to her children. She knelt, kissing each forehead, whispering, "You're my miracle." Then, without planning, without hesitation, she looked up and extended her hand toward Marcos. He froze. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then, with trembling fingers, he took it, not as a husband reclaimed, but as a father finally home. And in that touch, in the warmth of skin on skin, in the silent promise passing between them, the past didn't vanish. Admiration. But they stood in their own quiet orbit, the three children between them like anchors. Dr. Elias approached, his expression unreadable, though his eyes held a question. "That was unexpected," he said gently, glancing at their joined hands. Clara didn't release Marcos. It just felt right. Marcos finally spoke, voice rough with emotion. "I don't want to ruin this. I don't even know what this is yet. But I want to be worthy of it." Before Dr. Elias could respond, a familiar voice cut through the warmth like ice. Well, well, look who's playing house." They turned. Daniel Reeves stood there, Marcos's former mentor, impeccably dressed, a smirk playing on his lips. His eyes flicked from Clara to Marcos, then to the children, cold and calculating. "Didn't realize you were back in the family business, Marcos," Daniel said, sipping his drink. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised. After everything you told me about how complicated she made your life." Clara stiffened. Marcos's grip on her hand tightened. "I was wrong," Marcos said, stepping slightly in front of her, shielding the children with his body. "Dead wrong." Daniel chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Sentimentality doesn't win contracts, my friend. And Henderson's board isn't impressed by Daddy of the Year stunts. They want focus, ruthlessness, the man you used to be." The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. Clara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from fury. She stepped forward, voice calm but edged with steel. "The man he used to be abandoned his pregnant wife. Is that the version you miss, Daniel?" His smile faltered. Marcos turned to her, eyes wide with gratitude, and something deeper. "I don't want that life anymore," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I choose this. Them. Her." Daniel's expression darkened. He leaned in, voice dropping to a venomous whisper only they could hear. "You think this little fairy tale changes anything? You walked away from power, Marcos. And people like her, he jerked his chin toward Clara, will always hold you back. Before Clara could respond, Dr. Elias stepped between them, his presence commanding, voice low and firm. You're mistaken, Daniel. Clara doesn't hold him back. She lifts him up. And if you can't see the strength in that, then you've never understood leadership at all. Daniel's face flushed. He straightened his cufflinks, forcing a tight smile. Enjoy your moment. But remember, reputations are easy to rebuild. Trust, not so much. He turned and walked away, leaving a chill in his wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sophia tugged on Marcos's sleeve. Bad man. Marcos knelt, pulling her into a hug. No, sweetheart. Just someone who doesn't understand love. Elena, usually shy, surprised them all by stepping forward and taking Clara's hand, then reaching for Marcos's with her other. Mateo followed, pressing against his father's side. In that circle of small hands and steady hearts, the tension dissolved. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Clara and Marcos stood in silence, the children asleep in their strollers nearby. He's right about one thing, Marcos said quietly. People will always doubt me. Doubt us. Say I'm just trying to fix my image. Clara looked at him, really looked. Then let them talk. We know the truth. He turned to her, eyes glistening. Do you think we could ever be more than this? More than co-parents? She didn't answer right away. She thought of the empty apartment, the hospital nights, the years of silence. But she also thought of Saturday mornings, of shared lullabies, of the way he'd held Mateo during his fever. I don't know, she admitted. But I do know this. I won't rush into anything. Not for you. Not for me. For them. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Then, softly. Can I walk you home tonight? She looked at the children, peaceful in sleep, then back at him. The man who left, and the man who came back. Yes, she said. But just to the door. He smiled, a real, humble smile. Just to the door. And as they walked through the quiet streets, the city breathing around them, Clara realized something. Healing wasn't a destination. It was every step they took. Together, apart, forward, choosing each other. Again, when they reached her building, she turned to him at the entrance. Thanks for walking us. He stopped, hands still on the stroller handles. Clara, can we talk? Just for a minute. She hesitated, then nodded toward the small courtyard just inside the lobby. Benches beneath a canopy of ivy, lit by soft amber lamps. They sat, the children, sleeping peacefully between them. Marcos took a deep breath. After Daniel said what he did tonight, I realized something. I've been so focused on proving I've changed that I forgot to ask what you need. Not as a co-parent, not as a project, but as a woman who loved me once, and who might never love me that way again. His voice cracked on the last word. Clara looked down at her hands, twisting the simple silver band she still wore. Not out of hope, but habit. I don't know what I need, Marcos. All I've known for 2 years is survival. Now there's space for more. And it terrifies me. Why? He asked gently. Because, she whispered, tears welling. If I let myself want you again, if I open that door, and you leave again, I won't survive it. The kids won't. He reached out slowly, not touching her, just letting his hand rest near hers on the bench. I'm not the same man who walked out that door. That man was afraid of everything. Responsibility, chaos, love that demanded more than he thought he had to give. But you showed me that love isn't about having it all together. It's about showing up messy and trying anyway. She finally looked at him. And if you get scared again? I'll tell you, he said firmly. I'll say, I'm scared, instead of running. Because losing you twice would destroy me. And I won't do that to them. Or to you. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city and the soft sigh of Sophia in her sleep. Then, quietly, do you remember our first date? Clara asked. He smiled faintly. You spilled coffee on my shirt. Said it was fate making sure I'd remember you. I lied, she admitted. I did it on purpose. I liked you too much to let you walk away unnoticed. He laughed, a real, warm sound that made her chest ache. And I spent the whole night pretending to be annoyed while secretly saving that shirt. They both smiled, the memory a bridge across the broken years. But this isn't that, she said softly. We're not those people anymore. No, he agreed. We're deeper, wiser, scarred, but maybe stronger because of it. She studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the sincerity in his gaze, the absence of the old arrogance. What if we try something new? Not going back, but moving forward, together, as partners in raising them. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just us, figuring it out day by day. His eyes filled with tears. That's all I've ever wanted since I saw you on that stage. A chance to be part of your life, not as the man who left, but as the man who stayed. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. Instead, she reached out and covered his hand with hers, just for a moment. Start by being here tomorrow morning. They have playgroup at 9. It's chaotic. Loud. You'll probably spill juice on your shoes. He squeezed her hand gently before she pulled away. I'll bring extra socks. As she stood to go, Matteo stirred in his stroller, blinking awake. Dada, stay. Marcos leaned down, brushing a curl from the boy's forehead. Not tonight, buddy. But I'll be here tomorrow. Promise. Matteo yawned and snuggled back into his blanket, already trusting the words. Clara watched them, her heart a storm of hope and fear, love and caution. At the door, she turned back. Marcos. He looked up. Don't make promises you can't keep. He held her gaze, steady and sure. I won't, because this time, I'm not running toward something. I'm running home. And for the first time in 2 years, as she closed the door behind her, Clara didn't feel the weight of solitude. Her heart skipped. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door. Marcos stood there, holding a paper bag that smelled of fresh croissants, wearing jeans and a sweater, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. And, true to his word, extra socks peeked out of his coat pocket. On time, he said with a tentative smile. You remembered the juice, she noted, nodding at the carton in his other hand. Wouldn't be the first time I've worn breakfast, he replied, stepping inside. Though I drew the line at matching socks. Sophia spotted him first. Dada! She scrambled off her chair and ran, arms wide. He caught her mid-leap, lifting her into a hug that made her giggle. Elena watched from the table, then slowly slid off her chair and walked over, pressing her cheek shyly against his leg. Matteo held up his bear. Breakfast? Marco set Sophia down and took the bear gently. Absolutely. Mr. Snuffles gets extra berries. As he helped serve breakfast, spilling a little oatmeal, laughing it off, wiping Sophia's chin with a napkin, Clara watched from the counter. Not with suspicion, but with something quieter, observation. She saw how he knelt to Elena's level when speaking to her. How he let Matteo help pour the juice, even though half of it splashed onto the floor. How he didn't rush them. Didn't check his phone. Didn't look for an exit. This wasn't performance. This was presence. Later, at playgroup, he sat cross-legged on the colorful mat while the children climbed over him, built block towers on his lap, and dragged him into games of pretend. When another parent asked if he was the new dad, he simply smiled and said, just learning how. On the walk home, Elena held his hand. Sophia rode on his shoulders. Matteo clutched his finger like a lifeline. At her door, Clara turned to him. You stayed the whole time, even when Sophia threw a block at your head. He rubbed his temple with a grin. Worth it. She hesitated, then stepped closer. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About moving. Forward. His breath caught. Anne, I don't know if I can love you the way I did before, she said honestly, voice low. That woman is gone. But maybe I can love the man you're becoming. If you keep showing up like this. Not for a day. Not for a week. For years. He didn't reach for her. Didn't make promises. He just nodded, eyes glistening. Then I'll keep showing up. Every single day. She studied him, the sincerity in his posture, the quiet strength in his silence. Then softly, stay for dinner tonight. Just stay. He didn't smile triumphantly. He simply said, okay. That evening, as they washed dishes side by side, him drying, her rinsing, the children played in the living room, their laughter drifting through the open doorway. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything left unsaid. Then quietly he spoke. I used to think love was grand gestures, big declarations. But now I see it's this. Washing dishes, picking up toys, waking up at 3 a.m. because someone had a nightmare. It's choosing each other in the ordinary moments. Clara looked at him, water dripping from her hands. And if one day you wake up and realize this isn't enough? He turned off the faucet, dried his hands, and finally met her eyes. Then I'll ask you to help me remember why it is. She didn't kiss him, didn't throw her arms around him, but she leaned her shoulder against his just for a second and whispered, okay. And in that small touch, in that quiet word, something shifted. Not because the past was forgotten. Ox disappeared and Sophia insisted on wearing her rain boots to the grocery store. He didn't ask for praise. He didn't expect forgiveness. He simply showed up, steady, present, learning the language of their lives one small moment at a time. But trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble overnight. It rebuilds in fragments, in glances held a second too long, in hands that almost touch but don't, in the way Clara still locked her bedroom door at night, not out of fear, but habit. Then came the storm. It wasn't metaphorical. A late spring tempest rolled in one evening, thunder shaking the windows, rain lashing against the glass like fists. The power went out just as Clara was tucking the children into bed. Elena screamed. Sophia buried her face in her blanket. Matteo scrambled out of his crib and ran straight to the living room, where Marcos was reading by flashlight. He caught him mid-sprint, lifting him into his arms. "Hey, it's okay. Thunder's just the sky talking." Clara appeared in the doorway, heart pounding. Not from the storm, but from the sight before her. Marcos sitting on the floor, Matteo curled against his chest, Sophia peeking out from behind the couch, Elena slowly stepping closer, drawn by the calm in his voice. "Come here, little storm watchers," he said softly, patting the space beside him. One by one they gathered, Elena leaning against his shoulder, Sophia crawling into his lap, Matteo clutching his shirt. Clara stood frozen in the doorway, watching the man who once fled from responsibility now become their shelter. He looked up at her, eyes soft in the dim light. "You too." She hesitated, then sank onto the rug beside them, her back against the couch. He didn't move toward her, didn't reach for her hand, but his presence wrapped around them all like a blanket. As thunder boomed again, Sophia whimpered. Marcos began to hum. The same lullaby Clara used to sing, the one he'd remembered from years ago. The children relaxed instantly, their breathing slowing. Clara turned to him, voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know that song?" He kept humming for a moment, then stopped. "Because it was the first thing I ever loved about you. The way you'd sing it when you thought no one was listening. Like it was your secret prayer." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought you never paid attention." "I paid attention to everything," he admitted. "I just didn't know how to stay." Silence fell, filled only by the rain and the children's soft breaths. Then, quietly, Elena looked up at him. "Dada stay forever?" Marcos's throat worked. He looked at Clara, seeking permission, guidance. She didn't speak. She just nodded. He turned back to Elena, cupping her small face in his hand. "If you'll let me, sweetheart. Every single day." Sophia yawned. "Promise." "I promise," he whispered. And in that dark, storm-lit room, surrounded by the people he'd almost lost, Marcos made the only vow that mattered. Not with grand words, but with his presence. Later, after the children finally slept, Clara and Marcos sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the last of the rain drip from the trees. "You didn't run," she said softly. "I finally understand," he replied, voice rough. "Running doesn't make the storm stop. It just means you face it alone. And I don't want to be alone anymore." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the ghost of the man who left, but the father, the partner, the man who had fought his way back through shame and silence. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "So am I," he said. "But maybe we don't have to be scared alone." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached for his hand, and this time she didn't let go. And as the city lights flickered back on one by one, so did something else, hope. Not the fragile kind. Space, learning each other again, not as the people they'd been, but as the ones they'd become. One evening, after bedtime stories and final goodnight kisses, Clara found Marcos on the balcony, staring at the city skyline, a single sheet of paper in his hands. "What's that?" she asked, stepping beside him. He didn't look up right away. "I've been working on it for weeks," he said quietly. "I wanted to get it right." She took the paper. It was a legal document, but not the kind she expected. Not custody papers. Not a contract. It was a handwritten letter, addressed to her, signed before a notary. Her eyes scanned the first lines. "To Clara, I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking for something more valuable. The chance to earn your trust, every day, for the rest of my life. These past months have shown me what love truly is. Not grand gestures, but showing up when it's hard. Not walking away when you're scared, but staying even when you don't know how. I am not asking to be your husband again. I am asking to be your partner. In raising them, in building something real, in facing whatever comes next together." Her breath caught. She looked up at him, tears already spilling over. "I meant every word," he said, voice rough. "I've spoken to a family counselor. I've set up a trust for the kids. I've stepped back from consulting projects that require travel. I want to be here. Fully. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. She folded the letter slowly, her hands trembling. Why now? Because I realized something, he said, stepping closer but not touching her. I spent years chasing success to prove I was enough. But being enough isn't about achievement. It's about presence. And I want to be present for them and for you, if you'll let me. She looked down at the letter again, then back at him. This isn't just words, Marcos. This is a lifetime. I know, he said. And I'm ready to live it. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of leaves. Then, softly, what if I say no? He met her gaze, steady and calm. Then I'll keep showing up as their father. I won't push. I won't disappear. I'll respect your boundaries. Because they deserve consistency, even if we never get back to US. His humility undid her. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You left once, she whispered. Don't make me wonder if you'll leave again. I won't, he promised, voice breaking. I'd rather lose everything else than lose you three again. She didn't kiss him. Not yet. But she took his hand and pressed it over her heart. Then stay. Not as the man who left, but as the man who came back and chose to remain. He covered her hand with his own, tears streaming down his face. Always. Inside, the children slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet vow made under the stars. But outside, in that moment, something old finally died, and something new, tender and true took its first breath. Not a reunion, but a beginning. As a survivor, but as a builder. Marcos sat in the front row, not alone, but flanked by Elena, Mateo, and Sofia, now 3 years old, chattering excitedly about the big house for babies. He held Sofia's hand, Elena leaned against his shoulder, and Mateo kept tugging his sleeve to point out butterflies in the garden. Clara looked down at them mid-speech, her voice softening. This place isn't just bricks and windows. It's proof that broken things can become beautiful when someone chooses to stay and mend them. Her eyes met Marcos's. No grand gesture. No dramatic pause. Just a look, deep, quiet, full of everything they'd walked through together. After the ceremony, as guests mingled under string lights, Dr. Elias approached them, holding 3 small cupcakes with single candles. For the birthday trio, he said with a smile. Sofia clapped. Cake! As they gathered on a bench beneath a maple tree shedding crimson leaves, Marcos lit the candles. The children blew them out with giggles, frosting smearing on their cheeks. Clara watched them. Their laughter, their ease, the way they reached for both her and Marcos without hesitation, and felt a peace so deep it brought tears to her eyes. Later, as the sun dipped below the skyline, she and Marcos walked the children home, hands brushing but not yet joined. At her door, he turned to her. I keep thinking about that day I left, he said quietly. How I thought I was saving myself. But I was just running from the best thing I'd ever have. She looked at him, then at the children already yawning in their stroller. We're not the same people we were. No, he agreed. But maybe that's the gift. We didn't find our way back to each other. We built something new from honesty, not nostalgia. She stepped closer. And if one day you wake up and realize this life is too messy, too ordinary. He cut her off gently, cupping her face with a tenderness that still startled her. Clara, this is the dream. Not the penthouse. Not the promotions. This, wiping faces, reading stories, watching them grow, it's everything I thought I didn't want, until I almost lost it all. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm still learning to trust it. Then let me help you, he whispered. Not with promises. With presence. And then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't desperate. It was soft. Certain. A quiet seal on 1,000 small choices made over months of showing up. When he pulled back, Elena tugged his sleeve. Kiss Mama again? He laughed, pulling Clara close, resting his forehead against hers. Every day, if she'll let me. Inside the apartment, as bedtime routines began, Clara tucked Sofia in first. Dada stay? The little girl asked sleepily. Yes, sweetheart, Clara said. He stays. In Mateo's room, he climbed into bed and patted the space beside him. Story. Marcos sat on the edge, opening the worn copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Always. Finally, in Elena's room, she held up a drawing, a stick figure family under a rainbow, Mama, Dada, and 3 small circles labeled Me. Marcos pinned it to her wall. Best picture ever. Later, in the quiet living room, Clara and Marcos stood by the window, watching the city lights blink on one by one. You know, he said softly, I used to think love was something you found, but it's something you build, brick by brick, day by day. She leaned into him, finally letting her guard fall completely. And what if we get it wrong sometimes? We'll fix it, he said, wrapping an arm around her. Together. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside, in that warm, imperfect, beautifully mended home, something eternal had taken root. Not because they were perfect, but because they chose each other, again and again, in the ordinary magic of every day.